Hello, Akash. Hello, Sharem.
Hello.
How's everything going this week? Any fun things after lots of meeting last week?
No, this has kind of been the recovery week for some folks. The no meeting
No.
week in the US at least, so definitely less face.
Yeah,
No.
it's Shanghai's been off this week as well, so it's been pretty quiet. Hello, Josh.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Yeah, pretty good. In Australia, school holidays just started, so we're in like a bit of like a non-routine mode. Like every day we have to figure out, where are we sending, which camp are we sending the kid today?
The scramble, as I call it.
Yeah, it's good to change up the routine from time to time.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm gonna set up my screen. I think Akash is the youngest person here. Akash, do you enjoy summer camp?
Um, it depends on the summer camp. Some were fun, some were, you know,
Kumon camp, not fun.
exactly. I was just gonna say I was part of the Kumon generation and uh those there were better days than that for sure. So
Hey guys.
Well, kids are still going to Kumon. Anyone else been to Kumon? I have not.
don't go to Kumon.
Okay, yeah. Just based on your opinion, like every time other parents like that I hear that they're sending their kids to Kumon, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna wait and see. And
It's where fun goes to die.
so today I'm sending my kids to hip hop classes today and tomorrow. Next week he's going to drama camp for a day. And then like here and there, I also send him to tennis. Um, but I don't know if it's better to just like keep sending them to the same camp like for the whole week so they can really master the skill or start to get a taste of like, what do you do if you really get into tennis? Then you have to train every day and all that. But at the moment, it's just like a mix of things, just to get a feel of everything.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm gonna start sharing my screen. I'm gonna bring it to this side. Share. Um, what is this window? Oops, I closed it. Sorry. It was in the way and then I um, accidentally closed it. Let me share again. Can everyone see the screen?
Sure can.
Thanks. I did put a few things on the agenda, but I think we should go through the PR first. Yeah, thanks for taking notes. I saw like Josh, you posted a couple of questions on like, should we change the data structure? Should we cache the disabled certificate? And Akash also had some question around whenever we fetch the latest version, do we just append it to the cache or would it be like an override of the entry? So let's have that discussion first.
Sure.
request. Josh, do you prefer me to go through the content or
I
the
think so.
comments?
Let's see. We can start with comments and then we can go to the document for the open questions. We could review the document too, but I think everybody here has kind of read through it. So we could probably just go to comments first and then the document.
Yeah, so the first comment is just adding some examples on where we would introduce the parameter.
Yep, that should be added now. You can resolve
Oh,
if you
cool,
want.
thanks. We'll review that soon. 3, is it a good default? We should probably just tag E on the thread just to make sure he doesn't have any concerns, but I think we can just set it to 3 now, and it's easy to change if we need to.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned it like as high as 10. I also want to check, do we want to set a limit? Like what's the largest number you can set?
Yeah, that's a good question. I hadn't really considered that. The highest that I've seen from customers has been 10, but if we don't put a limit in there, then I could see someone's going to set it to, whatever. And then what does that do to Ratify? So it
Yeah,
probably
then
would be a
is
good
there
idea to
a
have
option that we're going to provide to say fetch all the version?
I don't know. I mean, because a lot of this basically matches a written retention policy. So whatever that matches, that might be a case that you need to store everything. Maybe if you're a healthcare provider or something. Um, so yeah, we should probably figure that out. And then also, what do we want to set a limit to? Like, I don't know at what limit would the would it cripple Ratify if it was cajillions of entries? But that would take a lot of work to do. That'd be a lot of certificates. What's Key Vault's limit? I guess we could set it to Key Vault's limit. So I don't have any good suggestions there if anybody else does. But those are good questions.
Yeah, Akash, do you have any insights into like what does Key Vault do? Or do they just like have a paginated response?
They should have a paginated response. I mean, that's given basic API principles, I'd assume they do have that. I don't know what the limit is, but yeah, I think I agree with Josh. Whatever they're doing, maybe we can kind of pin off of that. In terms of supporting all, I think the scenario then becomes like customers, like why wouldn't they just specify all? It's easier for them to deal with that, right?
Not secure.
It's not secure. I guess it's not as secure, so never mind. But
I think if we were, at least for the first pass, that might be a good like revision to it or like a
yeah,
feature afterwards. But I think now, if say my retention policy is 2, I'll just set it to 3 or whatever it is. So as long as we're giving them the ability to define a range that also fits their policy, I think that's at least good for the first implementation. Because a lot of times, most of the time in the policy, it's going to be written that they need 2 versions or 3 versions, and then that doesn't change. So like, it won't go to 4 the next year because they have to get rid of that other one. It'll be deleted and removed, so they'll never really move past 3 if they're following their policy, and so then they would never need to say all, like all the past versions, because they should within a year's time have removed everything that's used that old certificate and be fully on the new one, and then roll forward. So.
Yeah, another reference point we could use is the secret store driver implementation. Just to double check like what are their defaults.
follow up
Yep,
on that.
that's a good point.
Okay, so I think this, it's even though it's on the same thread, this goes into another topic on if we want to modify the data structure. I think it's somewhere here that, do we want to leave the data structure as is? Or do we want to change the structure to group versions of certificate together?
The only thing that I could think of where we would need to change it, because I don't think it's being used anywhere else. It's just kind of being flattened and then passed to the verifier. But if we wanted to keep parity with the upstream, um, and also be able to report on a disabled status, because right now, if we were just to leave the logic in as it is and then add something to delete disabled, then Key Vault's going to say disabled, Ratify is deleted, but deleted is actually a different state in upstream. And so if we change the data structure to also have a status, so if it was disabled in Key Vault, the status would change in Ratify to disabled, and then the cert data would be deleted or at least ignored when that is flattened and then passed to the verifier. So then there's a true pairing between the upstream and Ratify. Right now, it would just kind of delete it, and it'd be a little bit confusing. Wait, from Ratify's perspective, delete and disabled are the same, and so that might cause some confusion. So if we did change, that's kind of the only valid use case that I could think of for changing the data structure and then
Yeah.
keeping some kind of state in the KMP.
My initial thinking is that I believe this CAMP maps, are they generic? That's applicable to all of the providers, or are they specific to keyboard? If
All
they're
providers.
generic,
Yeah.
All
then I
providers.
feel like we should keep the data structures like generic as possible, because we're not building like a AKV specific data structure. And from a application logic perspective, like keeping it simple may be easier to debug. Just my initial thought. Akash and Shuan, do you have some opinion?
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from, but I feel like what Josh is pointing to, where if we're not more along the same line of how AKV, or I feel like it's pretty reasonable to assume any sort of cloud key vault management provider would also set things up in a similar way. I don't know how Vault works, but I assume also Vault has a concept of a lineage of versions and things that are specific to a certificate or a key. So I think it might be extensible even if we did switched over. And then while also being able to bubble up certain information about like the status being disabled or whatever the status reported by that particular provider for that version and key/certificate combination is. So I think if we changed it, it's a little bit more effort implementation wise, but maybe it would be worth it.
I think we could
Another
keep.
question.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Okay, yeah, I think we could keep it generic enough and change it to a degree, because a lot of them, aside from inline, are going to have this at least the state value, and that's kind of the only field that I have in my mind that I would add to this data structure, from a fields perspective. But then we also have to. The next question is, do we want to group versions together and show any kind of lineage there, or can they just be stacked on one top of each other? Because really, the only linkage between them is really in like Azure Key Vault's UI, like the certificates themselves. They don't have. They're not in the keychain, or
Yeah.
what is I'm not. What's the word I'm looking for? Certificate chain, not keychain. I've been using Mac too long. Okay, that is my 2 cents.
Yeah, my other question is, I just want to clarify the disabled state of a key vault certificate or a key. Once it's disabled, you can still read it, or once it's disabled, key vault doesn't want anyone to have it.
Once it's disabled, you can't get the certificate data out of it. You can kind of get the state and you get information about it from Key Vault, but you can't actually get the certificate,
the
I
thing,
think.
the content out, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like there's an intention that it's disabled. No one should hold on to this. Should we clear it?
I think it means it shouldn't be used because you could enable and then it would be able to pull. But yeah, the intent is like you shouldn't be able to retrieve the secret
Yeah,
from.
I just
You
want to
shouldn't be
make
able
sure
to
like
retrieve the
we're
secret.
following security practices here.
I'll do some digging because I wonder if it'll return the public keys when it's disabled, but not the private keys if you're pulling the chain. Because then I'll look into that to make sure. Because if it is disabled, it returns nothing, then what we could do to reflect that in Ratify side is wipe out the cert data in the map, but or in the cache.
Josh, I might be remembering incorrectly, but I remember there was a difference between invoking the get certificates API and the get secrets API. And I remember there was like two different behaviors for like disabled state. So I don't know if you wanted to investigate that as well to see kind
Okay.
of how that would
Difference
work.
between
I remember there's some nuance there. So
Mm,
okay. Between the secrets package and the certificates package, or are they
Ye-
different? Okay.
yeah, because I think we
leave a
use
note
the
here.
secrets now, right? Susan, we switched to using the secrets for getting the full chain.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Josh, we need to confirm. So discussed.
Full chain without the private key though.
Yes,
We
but
get the
there,
private key, we throw it away.
Okay.
yeah, there's so when the user creates the cert, there's a non-exportable option, if you remember, for the private key. If they don't select that, then it'll return the private key, and then we have to basically warn the user, hey, we got the private key, we didn't do anything with it, but you should probably change
Mhm.
this setting.
Your cert
Yeah.
method, yeah.
We want to update the data structure to reflect evoke KMP structure how we want to make sure new data structure is generic and extensible, and then need to confirm the behavior of disabled secrets. If content can not be retrieved, we should wipe out from cache to follow security practice. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
On the first note, how are we going to make sure that the data structure is generic and extensible? Are we going to do some investigations on what providers we are going to support and like what the structure is looking like there, or how do we get that information?
That's essentially what I've done is I've got an AWS subscription and a GCP subscription, and I looked at their KMPs and just like what they allowed, and all of them allow us to all of them allow certificate rotation, and I can look at disabled, so they function very similar in that sense.
Are those the only providers that we are going to support, or
Most likely not, but those are the three primary ones. So I thought it would be a good initial check. But if there's other ones that I should take a look at, please let me know.
There was one more Akash where
HashiCorp,
Ian Feynman said,
Yeah, Vault.
Vaultica,
what was that company?
HashiCorp,
HashiCorp?
probably
HashiCorp. Yes.
just bought by IBM not too long ago.
Yep.
And there's one more issue that we have in our backlog, like enable KMP for like trusted signer. Do they have like rotations?
So trusted signer is, yeah, I don't know how we're gonna do management because they have very, very short-lived certificates. So I'm not sure about that
Yeah,
yet.
I'll just put it in because, we're looking into making that a provider as well.
Not a
Yeah.
huge not to sidetrack the entire conversation or go on a side quest, but why, so for the providers or for the KMP in general, um what's the value in storing them inside Ratify instead of when the verifier goes off, it could reach out to the provider directly? Was there a
Not fast
reason?
enough.
Not fast enough? Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense then. Yep.
Plus, we were having issues. Yeah, not fast enough. And then if your external plugins, you can't really take advantage of any pre-caching that's been done. So,
Yep. Okay. So how we're using notation and stuff, it wouldn't.
yeah.
Got it.
We have thought about making KMP a plugin model though.
Yeah. That's, yeah, we could do it. It's, how it's going to plug into the whole current way we store stuff in a map, that's not going to scale external plugin wise. So we'll need to go through design for that. But
Yeah.
You sound excited about it.
It's gonna be work. It's work. And it's like an onion you keep peeling and you're like, but what about this and that? Because we tried doing the same thing for the ORS store, where if you're trying to, cache between your different verifier plugins because they're dealing with the store directly and they're creating new instances of the store per invocation, and that causes huge problems. Process to process caching within the same, node is still tough. So yeah.
Cool. Josh, is there any questions about this comment?
No, so I did add an example of what it currently looks like. I got some questions in the open questions whether we want to change that, but right now, really what it does is it stacks the certificates. So say there's a certificate called Ratify with two versions, you would see an entry in certificates. So if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see, yeah, just a little bit down. That's exactly what you'd see is your certificate name version, a repeat of your certificate name and version. That's how it'd show up today. And I think if we didn't change anything, that's just how it would display it. Um, even even if we update the data structure and so forth. But we could change that too if we wanted to group versions together. So there's only, one entry for your certificate name, and then versions is now a slice or an array, and then it has both versions in there. That gets trickier to do,
I
but
feel
I
like I'm
mean,
happy with this, like the current status. Shreem, Akash, do you feel this is clear? How we display like just a flattened your certificate, and the version without grouping.
So as in instead of like having a list and then each certificate is like a sub grouping, is that
yeah, yeah. So if you had two certificates here with two versions, you'd see two entries, and then versions would have two entries inside that.
it's cleaner if we could group it, but I think it's right now it's also okay. I don't have a huge preference. Yeah.
And for
Yeah.
the data structure change, if we have a disabled or enabled state, would we see it here?
We could add that in there. Yeah, that's a good to do. Let's see here. Add disabled status to KMP status. Got it. But yeah, it could be added to, underneath version would be status, enabled, disabled for each. We
I
would just
think
retrieve that from the AKV for whatever the provider is, we could include that in because that's all just a helper function that calls the provider and gets that stuff.
and anyone on the call for feedback with the spec, the KMP spec. So we've got the like after this change, you know, we've got the refresh interval, we've got the version count. And if version is empty, then fetch latest. And I guess we also should discuss, is there a way to configure fetch all of the version? Or should we have an upper limit?
It probably just match whatever the max version count is. So like if version was absent, then max version would just grab, you know, whatever latest. Like if there's 3, it would grab 3, you know? But if you specified in here a version,
mm,
then it would only grab that one version until you added another one or whatever, and then it updated. But
yeah,
so that would be the sticking point is if you define a version here, you're locking to that, you're not going to take advantage of. So basically, this would be in conflict if you define version and max version count.
yeah,
It would never go past 1 because you specified a single version. So max
yes,
version count would only be applicable if version was gone.
yeah. Sounds like we need a validation of a warning message.
Go ahead, Akash.
Maybe I missed this, but why is max version count again at the root level?
Mainly because it would be easy to put a default. I mean, it would be easier in the code too. Would it be better in the parameters?
As
Instead of
in,
in the spec?
are we not specifying this per certificate?
Oh, good point. Yeah, I just had it global at the KMP level, so that's a good
I also
question.
assumed that. Good that you bring it up, Akash. I was like, oh yeah, max count is next to refresh interval because they're kind of like
It made
Yeah.
sense to me, you know,
goes
like
together, right?
everybody gets 3. Do we want it at the certificate level?
I just thought that, you know, you are talking about like for your specific certificate, you care about the last 3 versions of it. Or for your particular key, you care about certain number of versions. But because I think even in the secret store provider, if I'm not mistaken, it's done at the per object level.
Okay,
So,
I'm not opposed to that if that makes more sense.
but we can double check that as well.
Yeah, let me put a comment here.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this one, so quote that. Discussed in community meeting, we should check the default behavior for is it called CSI driver, CSI driver,
CSI secret store. Yep.
CSI secret, I'll just put secret store CSI. The thing we want to check for, like, is there a max version? What level is max version per object or CR level? Is there anything else that we previously discussed?
I think that's it for that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. For
Did you include the inclusion of both, like the max version and also the version? So
yeah, an all version. Yeah, good reminder. Thank you.
Isn't this the similar behavior we had with the refresh interval? So when you specify refresh interval and you also specify the version, then refresh interval is ignored? Was that the same behavior? I don't know if I had.
The refresh is how often it's going to check, if it will, or how often it will check the provider itself for changes. And this is saying how many versions of
Yeah, I know
the
that,
particular
but like
object. Yeah.
if you specify version interval 1 minute and you also specify the version, you don't leave it empty, then it's gonna stick to that version, right? It's not refreshing it. Is that
It
the
might get disabled.
Yep. The status. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you had one, yes, it would not go past one, correct? But the status could change. It could either be deleted or disabled, and then the KMP would now update with the refresh logic. Before you'd have to change it because it would hold on to the cert data.
Okay, I probably need to test it again. Because Suzanne, do you remember that I was testing it and the test didn't pass, but I was making a mistake in setting up the resource? I think it was because both values were specified in the resource, and then the refresh was not happening. You, well,
Yeah, I have this memory of like trying to figure out why it did not refresh, but I don't
yeah,
remember what was
we
the
looked
root
at the
cause.
logs and we realized that the refresh is not happening because I was actually making it stick to a specific version by specifying the version. I think the solution was that just like max version count, we shouldn't have both values specified in the resource. If we
Hmm.
do, then it's going to stick to that version and it's not going to refresh it as far as I remember, but I can double check that.
Yeah, please do and let me know because it should refresh it even if the version's there. It just won't update the version. So if you created a new version of the certificate, it shouldn't update the key ID that's stored in there, but it
Mhm.
should be able to pull its status.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and previously we had a bug where if it was disabled, we still persisted in the cache. But my understanding is that also got fixed at some point.
Yes, because it'll error when it tries to fetch it now with the refresh on. So if refresh is working, then it'll catch it. But if refresh is not working, it'll stay.
Okay, so just want to go through all the comment.
I think we touched on this in the data structure discussion.
Yeah, I think there was a question about like, how, do we override or do we append? I'm trying to find that comment. Do you remember, Akash?
Override. I think the first comment on the longer thread above, that's where Josh had listed. Are we going to append? Are we going to override?
That might have been when was it Jing Chang's
Yeah,
comment?
Juncheng, I think.
Jing Chang's comment.
Hmm.
Well, with the copy, it's just gonna replace it,
Mhm.
right? Like it'll override. So if whatever version of that data is just gonna get overwritten because of the way that the copy works in the map.
So I think coming to this question, it's just basically a question of which state do we sync to? Do we sync to the existing ratify state, or do we sync to the upstream state? And I think we will just go with the upstream state, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and my question there is answered if, and we should change the data structure and have a status at least so that way we can stay in parity.
Yep.
Should we resolve this conversation or are there more investigation to do?
I think you can resolve it. Yeah.
Okay, now back to the open questions. So we talked about this one, correct?
Yep.
Um,
This is a good one. Yeah. So if a version is disabled, does that count towards the inversion count? Or would it not?
yeah,
Thoughts?
I would think it does because it still exists, it's not deleted. If it's deleted, then it's
Same.
Yeah.
My opinion would be the same, because if our guiding principle is we're going to try to mirror the upstream functionality as much as possible, we should stick to maintaining that same version count matching upstreams.
I would suggest maybe it's good to log this so that when we go back to it, we know that like if the max is 3 and we have 3 disabled, we cannot have some source of information to go back to if like the customer says, no, I do have a valid certificate, but maybe the 3 that we fetched, they were all disabled.
The 3 latest are disabled and you're trying to use the other one, so you should pin to it, so to speak. Yeah, that would all be reported in the status too. But yeah, we can add a log every time a disabled state, every time the state changes, we could log.
Status look like, do you have the answer for this one?
Let me read it real quick. What does the KMP status look like with multiple yeah, so we can keep it flat. I think we talked about that earlier.
Yeah. Should the data structure be changed to groups? Yeah, we talked about having the data structure reflect generic.
Yeah, so I struggle with it. So this one's more specific in flattening the certificates down and then having versions. So you'd have kind of like you'd have certificates and then underneath that you'd have versions kind of grouped together. So you could parse the map by just saying if the certificate name was Ratify, and then Ratify would give you version 1, version 2, or leave it flat and have 2 entries for Ratify with different versions. It's a little cleaner to do the versions underneath 1, but I couldn't think of any real reason like that it would help us in any way parsing it or anything like that. So I'm kind of like either way. The leaving it flat's easier, and then we don't have to change the helpers for flattening it to the verifier. But I don't know. I'm on the fence with that. I don't know what value it adds or if it's just easier or whatnot. So I'm open to suggestions on that. If we should change the data structure to add something like this where there's version underneath certificate, so you could say just get me it by the version or by the certificate name, and then I have multiple versions.
Akash, any opinions? Josh, I would vote for like something that's easy to implement, easy to debug, easy to understand, if there's no other benefits going the complicated way.
That's kind of where I was leaning to. So flat makes it easier, because then it just starts getting more difficult to parse the more layers you add to the data structure. So
Yep. I don't have a strong opinion either way, but yeah, easy sounds good. So
okay, fair enough. But add a status.
yeah.
Okay, can do.
Yeah, that one we also discussed to remain flat unless we see like a huge advantage of having them grouped together.
Okay.
I think it just comes down to also like which KMPs in the future would want, or which verifiers in the future would want like hierarchical data structure. Because if you're trying to index by version, I assume the map is what keyed by the name? I forget what it's keyed by.
CR. It's keyed by the name of the CR.
Yeah.
By the name of the cert, yeah.
So yeah, I can't really think of what future verifier would need that. So
yeah, the cert has everything that they need. They don't care about anything the KMP adds extra to that.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, anything else you want to bring up, Josh?
That's all I have now that I've taken up the entire meeting. But
it was a very productive.
I thought so.
Yeah, and then we'll just summarize it. and then be like, this is what we're going with. And do you have any feedback?
Sounds good.
I just sent a message in the chat. Susan, would you be able to open the link?
Oh, yeah, sure. You want the link to this one?
No,
it's
the
in the
link
chat. He
that I
shared a
sent
link.
in the chat.
Oh, sure. Let me find my Zoom window.
I think this is the PR that I was working on, and I realized that if you specify the refresh interval value, and you also specify a version of the certificate, then the refresh interval was ignored. And I think it was meant to be ignored. So we just passed the test. But since we brought it up again, I just want to double check that that's the expected behavior.
Yeah. Sorry,
I think
am I in the right section?
I'm not seeing it actually on my
Might be a
screen.
different screen.
Oh,
I still see
yeah. Sorry. Yes, you are right.
I think it's the second, if you bring the second scenario of the testing in the PR description. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is like we modify this, we add a refresh interval for 20 seconds. And in the certificates, I'm not specifying a version. If you look at the certificates, there's a name for it. And then I just do the test, everything works fine. But if, I mean, Suzanne, if you remember, we were actually specifying a version and the refresh interval was ignored. It wasn't refreshing the certificate. And I think that was expected. But not sure if we should have a validation that, hey, you specify the refresh interval and you are also specifying a version to the certificate. Are you sure about that? Like something like that. Because in that case, the refresh interval is ignored.
I
Makes
think
sense?
we should, if that is the case, it should be a bug fix then, because if you have a specific version done, the refresher is still valid because the state of the certificate or key could change, and then it would still need to be updated. So the version, specifying a version should not disable the refresher.
But is it like,
I mean, it might be. I haven't tested it. I take your word for it. But the version shouldn't be a property that disables the refresher. If you've got a refresher interval set and a version set, the refresher should honor that and just try to refresh that specific version of the certificate.
and I think that's the behavior. That's what I'm saying. That's the
Oh,
expected behavior, and that's what it does. I'm just saying that we have a refresher and we also are specifying a version. Back to the discussion we had like 10 minutes ago, I just wanted to make sure that this should be allowed or not. Like, do we allow that we specify both attributes in the YAML file?
I believe, yes, I believe so. For the refresher, I think there's a little bit of a different case for the Mac version, because that's just how many of them are now going to be stored. So if you
Mhm.
specified a particular version, then it should always so say, I think this is maybe where you're kind of getting to. So with the property value of the max version count, say that's set to 3, but you set the certificate version and you only specify one of them, you'll never exceed one version.
Mhm.
Right, but that would be for this new feature that is being proposed in the design doc. The refresher wouldn't have anything to do in that scenario. That should be called out, I suppose, in the documentation, because it won't ever go past the 1 because you specified it. So if you want to use max version count, don't put a version, or put 3, whatever matches your desired number of certificates. That's the only case where the version should impact any of the other properties.
Right. But in the case of the refresh interval, if we specify refresh interval like 10 seconds, right?
Okay.
And a few seconds ago, we fetched the version that was specified in the YAML file, and then now a new certificate is created. the current behavior is that it's going to stick to the previous version, the one that was specified.
Right.
That's just want to make sure that's the
Desired.
expected behavior,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
basically the refresh interval value is going to be ignored.
It's no. So there's not a direct correlation to latest and refresher. The refresher actually refreshes all the properties of certificates. So the pinned one, its properties could change and it would be refreshed in the KMP. And that's still a valid cycle of the refresher, even though it didn't grab the latest.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. Cool.
Josh, in this scenario, I just want to make sure, like maybe we can try log a warning that, hey, you specified. I don't know how we can. Well, it depends on where the version count lives. But if the per certificate object had specific versions and then with the version count, then it's going to get ignored.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a warning at that, or at least an
Log.
informational log or something like
Yeah.
that would be useful at that
If
level.
doable, yeah.
Yeah, totally doable. Let me note that.
Yeah. Okay, so glad we got to clarify that. Yeah, what is our next agenda? I just wanted to check on the onboarding list. Because last time Akashi mentioned that there's some security review that we should be doing. So I was trying to look for that item, but I didn't see it. So I was gonna just bring up the issue we have for CNCF. So we have this prepare for donation. 1, 3, 3, 4.
So
Okay, so we have these 1, 2, 3. Is there another one somewhere?
yes, there's so it's actually under the sandbox issue.
Yeah. Okay.
Not the onboarding one, the number
Okay.
2. Yeah.
Number 2. Okay.
So if you go to the tag security recommendation post, scroll up a little bit.
Up.
No, where you were before. So keep going down. Someone from tag security left yeah, there we go, this one. So if you
Yeah.
see, this is where they said we recommend doing this.
I see.
Yep.
And what does this involve? Like there's no links or anything.
So there's on the tag security website, there's a link to a self-assessment, and it's just a giant questionnaire. That's my understanding. And then after that, I believe they review it, and then we may have to attend some sort of meeting. But it could be that we may have to go through, they may say, can you go through a formal security review process? And that's where Notary Project is going under right now for the second time. And that they hired they have an external company that comes and tries to basically do like a full, almost like a pen test on the project and figure out where all the security holes are. But that's a much larger effort. So let's hope we don't get there just quite yet, because I think there's quite a few things we need to fix before then. But let's start with probably the self-assessment and see what they say.
Well, I like this verbiage. Perform a tag security self-assessment as the project moved towards incubation.
Yeah, no, so I guess, I mean, it's not part of onboarding. I think we just have to do it. We should do it as part of like a CNCF project, and especially a security project, right?
Yeah. Okay. So my understanding is we'll wrap up the onboarding task first.
Yeah.
And then this is like separate from onboarding, and we can do that after we've finished our long onboarding checklist.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll, go ahead and understand what this is. Cool. And for our onboarding, okay, so we have this one. Let me clean up the. So we have this one, no action item here, right? It's open. And review and understand, are we meant to tick them off as we go?
I think Feynman's been using the one, he copy pasted this one into the Ratify issue, but
Yeah,
I don't know if we transfer it here once we've completed it or.
yeah. So, okay, so there's that one. And then this one we just reviewed. This one is in a closed status. Status closed. But we have that to-do item here. And then for the ratify issue, I think Feynman is trying to work through this task. Let's see, where is he at? Okay, so he's been ticking off items here.
That's the, yeah, if you scroll down, it's the action, he's copy pasted it below. Yep, this one.
Okay. I guess this is still, this one is done, right? No, sorry, trademark and logo asset. Okay, I guess this is in progress then. Let's see if there's any comment.
Oh.
Yeah, it's already end of September. Is that what,
Yeah.
what the O was about?
We're in October now.
Yeah.
You almost got it.
Yeah.
Almost
Okay.
there.
So when Feynman comes back, we'll check in with him again.
Yep.
Cool. Anything else people want to discuss today?
That's it for me.
I-
Thanks everybody for the feedback on the design
Yeah,
doc.
thanks for the
Appreciate it.
proposal, Josh.
Sorry to cut you off.
It's really good to align on those little details.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's much smoother than last time, I think, for me.
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
I also feel like sometimes working with our PM, because a lot of the scenario is uncertain. And we don't have a lot of data point. Like, I think the way we move forward is like, we'll just propose something. And if it's a reasonable start, we can start with that and then adjust it if needed later. Like, we're not aiming for perfection.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Happy Wednesday and Thursday then, everyone. Thanks for
I just
joining.
want to bring up
Oh,
one
yeah.
note.
Sure.
So I'm going to submit my PR for the migration of the Azure SDK
Yeah.
later today. I would really appreciate it if you guys can have a like thorough review of it, because this I'm feeling like mocking things is making it like less readable. I'm not sure if we are gaining much from mocking things. I find it, correct me if I'm wrong, but I find it really difficult mocking things in Go language. It shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, no, that's how it is.
Like you
How
have
it
It is
is.
how it
to
is.
slide, you
It
have
is
to
how
put
it
money
is.
into space, you have to, I actually have code that I wrote like a few lines in my actual file that is only being used in the test file. And I'm not sure if that's the correct way of doing things.
No,
It's
I mean,
not
I
called-
created an
nothing is not
entire,
called anywhere in the original
Yeah.
file. Sorry, Josh, go ahead.
so I created an entire function in the controller purely for the purpose of being able to mock
Exactly.
the behavior of the
Yeah.
controller.
Yeah.
Because there was no way to
I-
do it otherwise. It was
Exactly.
important to test it. But yeah, that's
I-
the way it is.
Okay. I thought I'm doing something wrong. That's a relief,
No.
but I find it making the code less readable. I'm not sure
Yes.
if that's, I mean, the trade-off is actually valid here. Writing a unit test, not writing it to make it less readable, to make it more readable. Yeah, if you guys can have a thorough review, that would be much appreciated.
I think and Josh has learned this also the hard way.
Yeah.
Always create interfaces for everything so that it makes it much easier to mock. Otherwise, the reflect package in Golang is like you don't even want to touch that, and DI is like doesn't really exist in Golang. Dependency injection is not really a thing, as you know, other nicer languages like C# and Java and stuff allow for. So if you don't do interfaces, you're going to be in a world of pain.
So learn
Fortunately.
interfaces. Yeah, that's what I learned.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coaching us, Akash, on this. That's
Just,
how we increase, test coverage.
Lived experience, learned the hard way.
I took it as a personal challenge my second time through the refresher refactor to get the test as high as I could just because I was annoyed with my first pass. So
Good for you, Josh.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sharam,
Yeah.
for looking into adding the unit test.
Yeah. Thanks. It's tough, but thank you for doing it.
No worries.
All right. Talk to you all later then.
See ya.
Yeah.
I'm going.
See you.
Have a good day.